Hello, welcome to Shaman Sister Sessions, episode number 22, Sacred Space. I am Katherine Bird, and I am here with Michelle Hawk. We are the Shaman Sisters, and we come to you every week to talk about spirituality, healing, shamanism, our lives and our paths, and what we see about the evolution of consciousness and the healing of people and planet. And today we're here to talk about sacred space, which is it's the perfect time to talk about sacred space because Michelle has just moved this weekend to a new sacred space. And I can't wait to hear more about your space and your experience of creating your sacred space there, because I know how important that is to you, and how when you move, it's like, oh, quickly, we must create the space.
It's absolutely. And I'll just, clue you into my moving process a little bit. I have a lot of crystals, number one. So that was, in looking at my stuff, right? So I have the truck full of my stuff. I did as much as possible beforehand to load all the boxes and stage everything. And when packing up my crystals, that is such an important part of me, of holding my sacred space. We'll get into that a little bit later about what are different components of sacred space. For me, a lot of that has to do with having my beautiful stones. I live in a crystal cave. So as I packed them all up, which I absolutely had to do, I couldn't leave it to the last minute. I could feel them in the garage because that's where I was putting all my boxes. And I have a lot of crystals. And as I was hauling them and then unpacking them, that's the only time I ever wish I had less. But every time I'm unpacking another one, I remind myself, okay, you love this. You're so happy to have this beautiful friend and ally in your life. And then, of course, as soon as they're all unpacked, I'm delighted again and happy to have them, and probably going to acquire more. But the unpacking process for me, having especially my crystals, my work items, my desk, my office setup, it's, I do it kind of Mary Poppins style, where I'll just show up and bam, 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 unpack, and there I am, rather than the gradual unpacking. I can't do that because I rely so heavily on having my foundation. For me, it's very important to have my space established, have my home established, because I do such high vibration work. I'm out there in the world with a lot of people, a lot of animals, doing my journey work, my astral travel work, doing my healing work. I need my foundation in place because it helps me be a better practitioner, and it means that I can go that much farther out of my body if I have the really strong root to come back to.
Yeah, that's such an important, just sentence there about traveling, about having a stable space that feels very safe and protected and held. And then that way you can actually have these experiences of astral traveling and coming back to home base.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not everyone works that way. Also, I think it's important to note, some people do very well in the more nomadic style, perhaps, where they don't need stuff. I like my stuff. I'm very Taurus, right? In the way that
Cancer. So I have to have very into the home, I have to have so much stuff with me all the time.
Yeah.
But we can think about our shaman sister, Maria Teresa Chavez, and her Aquarian soul. And I don't know how she does it, but she does her healing work just traveling constantly, and sometimes having no home base at all, really. And it is always, I watch her on Facebook, and when I see her, check in with her and all of her travels, I'm always just astonished at her ability to do this kind of work just on the fly and on the road. And I also know that she puts a lot of energy into creating that sacred space wherever she goes, that she does keep a kit sort of her sacred items that she's traveling with wherever she goes, so that she's able to do her work, because she's a traveling sacred space.
Yeah, absolutely. So some people do really well with that. And speaking for myself in terms of traveling, I love to travel. I've lived all over the world, and I travel doing my work as well. The thing that enables me to do that is that the fact that I have such a strong home base to come back to. I think if I didn't have the home base, I know this about myself. I used to judge myself for it a little bit of like, why do I have so much stuff? Why do I have so many crystals? And yet it is part of my fundamental makeup that my sacred space needs to look like a beautiful nest.
Yeah.
Other people's sacred spaces look differently, and that's okay. So we'll speak about a little bit of that and kind of what that entails. What are some different facets of sacred space? How do they appear in the world, and different examples?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So sacred space, what does that even mean? We're throwing that term around a lot. I feel like we should check into that.
Yeah. What does it mean?
Yeah.
There's so much there. So I think we can kind of unpack it a little bit by a little bit. But as we're talking about sacred space, I mean, really it's a space that is sacred, right? Mm-hmm. So if we were just going to say, what's the most simple thing? It's a space that is sacred. So it is a container. It is a place. It's this place where the sacred, the divine is accessing. So it's sort of like, a container and an access point for divine light and energies. And it's intentional, really. The intention is the most important part. It doesn't really matter whether you have a little tiny crystal or a big giant crystal, right? It's the intention. It's focus that you're bringing to the space, whatever it is, which
right. Absolutely. I think, again, intention, we touch upon this regularly in many of our episodes. Intention is the most powerful tool. So you can have an empty room that is filled with intention, and it is still a very deeply sacred space, as opposed to a room that might be filled with beautiful things without any intention that may or may not necessarily be a sacred space.
Right. So you see, like if you go to, sometimes you'll go to people's houses or, some kind of event or something, and maybe you go to someone's such beautiful home with all of their beautiful things, and maybe they have crystals and they have like gorgeous art and things like that there, but their decorator picked it all out, and it's sort of empty of the energy that's being called in. And then you can also go to someone's very humble little tiny home, and when you walk in, you're just like, whoa, this is amazing in here. It's so powerful.
Yeah. And it feels so good. Something about that vibration, that intention really hits home with you and resonates so deeply. So it's not dependent on the stuff. We're, both you and I, the Venus and Taurus in me and the Cancer in you is like, loves the stuff, the crystals, the beautiful soft fabrics, the comfortable bed, the princess pillows, the drapey fabrics, whatever. But it is not
like animal parts everywhere. And like,
right. Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. Here we go. Lovely, ceremonial objects, but it is not the stuff that creates the sacred space. It is the intention that creates the sacred space, and the physical items can help hold that vibration.
Yeah.
Sacred space also, you're speaking about an access point for the divine. I love how you put that. I think that's really appropriate. Sacred space can be everything from an electron, think very micro, like a cell. Each cell in our bodies can be a sacred space, all the way zoomed out to the very macro of, well, the universe is sacred space, right? So thinking about, and actually to our viewers, I invite you, this is a meditation that I offer to my Reiki students or to my clients as I feel called to meditate, go inside cells in your body and view them, kind of make yourself very small, go inside the cells and view it as a room, and bring the same intention that you would to creating sacred space in a room into your individual cells and see how that feels. And then, you know, go, okay, within each organ in your body, okay, inside your heart, inside your lungs, and create that intention of sacred space within the different organs of your body. And then in your body as a whole, and then in the room around you, then in the house, then, or the office, or wherever you are. And bring the sacred space from the very small, zooming out to encompass all that is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is really, that's such an amazing practice and meditation to beautiful, and especially as we're looking at healing work and healing ourselves, especially for, you know, we have illnesses and stuff that's happening. That's just such an important practice to have, and then we can start to see and feel into the parts of us that we don't feel are sacred as we kind of break it down and you know, look at like, okay, can I really connect to the sacredness of my heart? Can I really connect to the sacredness of my sex? Can I connect to the sacredness of the parts of my body that I've seen as unlovable before?
Yeah. Are my fat cells, are they still sacred? Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So why do we need sacred space? Why is it so important? This is something that I actually teach sacred space as part of my Reiki 1 class. And we go medium into it. We don't go full deep dive, but we do talk about it because it is a fundamental part of doing healing work in the world, being a light worker in the world, being an empath or a sensitive person in the world. It is absolutely essential to have sacred space. Why is that?
Well, you know, and I teach as part of the Healer's Process course, which will be launching soon. I teach an entire module on the sacred container, and going into how we are creating this sacred space to go into and out of healing work, whether we're working on ourselves or we're working on someone else, that it is when we are using that intentional focus, then we can call in the energies that we want to assist us and work with. So when we have access to specific energies that we're calling in, if we're working with angels and archangels, we're working with our guides, we're working with healing spirits, we're working with the elements or the directions, with animals, all of these different beings, we're like inviting them to our house. We're inviting them into a space. When we have a container that we've created and this is the home, okay, come over, then they have a place to come to. It's not so amorphous. It's like, okay, here's the container that we're working in today. So please, my beings of light and love, come to this space to do this work. And so it creates this, you know, boundaries place where the good stuff is coming in, and we're not inviting any of the trickster, darker stuff. We're just not inviting that into this space. It's a very safe and held container where we feel really protected, and we feel like we can go into really deep experiences of healing ourselves, or going, like you said, into astral travel space, or you know, whatever our healing modality is that we're using, that we can go deeply into that, and there's like this, you know, bubble around us where we're feeling really held.
Absolutely. The protection part is very important, even for those of our viewers who are not practitioners, where you are still, you know, if you're watching this podcast, guaranteed you're some kind of empath, sensitive person, etc. And it's really important to hold that safe and sacred container, because we feel, and you know, whether that container is in your home, in your office, in your car is sacred space, right? How many people driving out there do you think have road rage or have some kind of energy that they're just blasting out, right? We can create our sacred space in our car around us to help us be separate and safe and move safely through the world of people who are not paying attention. Yeah. Yes. Right. So even for the non-practitioners, this is still super essential. We're speaking about it in the context of, or Kat gave a beautiful example of using sacred space in the context of healing work and calling in, channeling energies. It
Yeah.
can also be good for, you know, kind of your personal healing work. It creates a healing space, a healing vibration. Imagine, what do you think one of the most important sacred spaces is where you do your own personal healing? Your bed, your bedroom, wherever you sleep. That's when our deep healing occurs, is when we're in sleep mode and rest mode. So that's why it's so important that your bedroom is, you know, you have if you work in your room, as I do, I close up my desk, I shut everything off, I separate out, you know, because the internet is a giant black hole of leaky energy. So I close it up. I have my beautiful salt lamps. You can see what to hold this safe and sacred space for me to go deep into rest mode and healing mode while I'm sleeping.
Yeah, that's really important, Michelle. And even if you, you know, we're saying if you're not a healer, like a lot of people are working in offices with so many people around them, just all kinds of crazy energy in and out. Maybe a cubicle. I remember I was going in and doing some work, instructional work at a state office building in Portland. And the woman who was in charge of sort of some of the, like, it was like sort of like the HR kind of stuff and you know, the experience for the employees, it was so adorable because she had a cubicle, right? As everybody had these cubicles, but her cubicle had like prayer flags and like colors and like sacred symbols. And, you know, she had created, even though it was just this office cubicle, which oftentimes seems so plain, she had really created it as a sacred space. So when you even just passed by, you were like, oh, it feels so different in there.
Yeah, that's huge. That's super important. I have another example. One of my Reiki students told me she works with the Fish and Wildlife Department. And so, you know, very sciencey and sort of clinical vibe at the office. And people love coming in to hang out in her office because she has done work to create sacred space in her office. They'll just be like, yeah, can I come sit in here? It feels really good in here. People notice, even if they're not necessarily tuned in or they don't know why, it feels good to us to enter sacred space. Yeah, it's something that we vibrate with it. And, you know, the people who aren't in alignment with it don't vibrate with that, and then they won't come in your sacred space, and that's okay. Or they'll come in because they really need it, and then they'll receive healing, and then they'll leave. Yeah. Yeah, so we gave some good examples, and of course there are many more examples of why do we need sacred space. And let's zoom out a little bit and speak societally, globally, about how can we, and why do we need sacred space kind of on the cultural level, and how can we help cultivate that there? Yeah.
I think that if we start looking at, if you look at tourism and like, where do people go? You know, people are magnetically drawn to sacred spaces. If you go to any church, temple, you know, different pyramid in the different countries, these places where people were intentionally creating sacred space, they were using a specific geometry and algorithms to line up things to the stars, using geometry to create certain ratios which were in harmoniously to you know, divine light. Like, we can't stop ourselves. We see a church and we're just like, oh, I just want to go be in there. I just want to sit in there for whatever reason, even if we're not a part of that religion or we don't hold those particular views, we love to be in that space. And when we do that, we feel more at peace. We feel better because there was so much intentionality brought into the construction and the creation of the space, the beauty and the way that it was put on the earth in a particular place, which often our ancient churches were built on top of ancient churches, which were built on top of ancient churches, because it's a specific place where these energies are so profound, and we created sacred space built upon the energy that was already there.
Yeah, along the ley lines and the meridians. That's an important component of, you giving some examples, and much of what we've talked about thus far has been man-made examples of sacred space. There are natural sacred spaces, of course, as well. So working with the flow of energy on the planet Earth, or within the planet Earth, the meridians, the ley lines, forests are sacred spaces. Have you ever walked into a forest and just felt like you were in a temple? Because it is this very beautiful natural sacred space. Waterfalls, for example, I find very sacred. It's like a portal experience of standing near a waterfall and receiving all those beautiful negative ions. And that is a healing experience. The ocean, many people find deeply sacred. Water is life, our sacred water. So they do intersect, though. You're speaking about building churches and temples in these sacred earth spaces, or in alignment with celestial energies. And I think it's really interesting also. I like giving this example of Las Vegas, right? So you can intentionally create disharmonious space. So I've never actually been to Las Vegas, but I've heard about this. They have the pyramids, right? In Strip. They are built intentionally out of alignment from each other, like shifted out of alignment from how they should be if they were, so the real pyramids are truly in alignment with the celestial energies. The Las Vegas pyramids, they built on purpose to be out of alignment. Why? Because when people are out of alignment, they're more likely to become intoxicated, more likely to spend a lot of money, more likely to lose a lot of money, right? So there is money to be made in creating disharmony. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think that we see that everywhere. We see a lot of societal intentional disharmony to disrupt us, so that we are not focused on the divine. We're not focused on the good parts of ourselves. We're focused on looking at negative aspects of self, and we can see that in our current constructions and the way things are built, and in very kind of just haphazard sort of a way, with not really any intentionality going into creation of homes and buildings and places where people spend all of their time. There's no intentional thought around currents of energy and the way things should be built. And then when you walk into somebody's home that has been built that way, you're just like, oh, it's so different.
Right. Or, I would even go so far as to say there is a lack of intentionality, but also in certain cases, as with Las Vegas, there is deliberate intentionality to disrupt the flow of energy.
Right. And I think in our offices that there's a lot of that it actually is intentionally created to keep you in a certain mindset.
Yeah. Or like you walk into a restaurant, like, I don't know, I feel like a lot of fast food restaurants have this, where they're all red. Everything is red because it puts you on edge, makes you eat faster, so you leave, so they can have a faster turnover rate of customers, rather than doing what is actually really good for your body and taking your time, eating slowly, enjoying the company around you, processing your meal makes them less money.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Okay. There's so many examples of this, and so many, I will just briefly touch upon it because it feels exciting to me to talk about, but all of the ways that society is conspiring to throw people out of energetic alignment. The healthcare industry, or the sick industry, makes money off of people not being well, right? So we live in a society where people are geared to take their medications and eat poorly and not sleep well. But that goes even farther. It goes into the energetic realms too. So if you think about it, we're living in a society that is deliberately structured to throw our bodies out of alignment so we stay sick. So it is vital to create sacred space, do that meditation, dive inside your cells, create the sacred space within you so that you carry it with you wherever you go, and then create your sacred spaces externally so you are surrounded and held in that protective, healing, nurturing, deep, rich energy. That's something that we have to do for ourselves because nobody around us is going to do it for us.
Yeah.
And we get to, and have to, you know, sounds like an obligation. It's something we get to do for ourselves to create what vibrates best with our state of being. It helps us get to know ourselves better and create intimacy with the way that we move through the world, which is lovely.
Yes. And, you know, I was at the hospital last week. And it's such a shocking experience on so many levels of being. It's just ridiculous just how, you know, the situation that we would place people in to expect them to get well is just, it's mind blowing.
Yeah.
And the people who are working there, and they're, you know, like you can hear they're talking super loud, and they're like, you know, talking about coffee and donuts and cookies, and like they're just like they're taking in so much sugar and caffeine just to like keep going, and it's just it's a fascinating thing. And for people who are having to be inside of that medical experience, maybe you have a, you know, a parent or a grandparent, someone close to you who is having to go through a medical experience, because sometimes you just have to go.
Mm-hmm.
And how can you then show up to help to create a more sacred space for your loved one, or for yourself if you're having to go through a medical experience, to start to have more consciousness. Like if you know that you need to go and be in the hospital, having consciousness around the things that you're bringing, because of the way that the system is not in support of this concept of sacred space.
Yeah. And even, again, we're speaking about the physical and the energetic components of a sacred space. I know in hospitals, there are certain parts of the hospital, you're not allowed to have a lot of stuff with you. Like you can't have plants or flowers or anything living, right? Or anything nurturing, just because it's a sterile environment. But sterile means dead, really, which is terrible. But you can still, with your intention, hold that sacred space for yourself. Imagine you're in the room and okay, I'm sending all this light out to every single corner of the room. I'm filling the room with light. I'm calling in my guides, my angels, my teachers, and you can still create the sacred space energetically, even if you don't have the physical components to back it up.
Yeah, and this is really important because the hospitals are messy places. There's lots of not so happy energies running around the hospital, and people are weakened in the hospital. So if you can help, you know, your loved ones or yourself by just doing these meditations, if you have to be in that space, it's really really helpful and vital.
Yeah. Sneak in crystals, little tiny ones. Yeah. Good. So let's speak about some components of what are some of these wonderful physical items that we can have to support our sacred space. So speaking of crystals, Kat, I remember you told me years ago, or a couple of years ago, we were speaking about having crystals in your bedroom, right? And what exactly did you say? You said, I heard something about it wasn't good to have so many crystals in your bedroom because it means you can't sleep.
Well,
and
I have had, you know, I had someone who said that they had to like cover everything. Like they were just having to like put covers on everything because they had gotten to this place where they were at that moment really sensitive to the frequencies and the messages and the things that were coming out of the crystals.
Yeah.
And so I actually went through a practice because I have crystals everywhere. So I actually have less crystals in my bedroom than I do in my living space. More of my crystals are in there. And when I used to have everything in the bedroom, I would kind of cover them up sometimes because I did find that sometimes the energy was just really strong. Yeah,
absolutely. I'm the opposite. I have all the things in my room with me. I live in a crystal cave.
At Michelle's house, and there's giant crystals in her bed. Like,
yep. Yeah, in my bed. I sleep with this giant quartz point, like yay big, wrapped in a towel in my bed with me. And I wrap it in a towel because I already ripped one set of sheets, just having it loose in bed. So and it's a little pokey. But yeah, so it is possible if you're like me and you like being surrounded by all those vibes, then, and you have agreements with your crystals. This is the other thing. I had it was an apophyllite cluster that I got a couple years ago, actually, where the first night I brought it home, I had it in my room with me, and it kept me up all night talking. So it was one of those stones like you were talking about, where it was chatty, chatty, chatty all night long. So in the morning I said to it, I said, look, if you want to be here in my room with me, it is your job to help me sleep well. So for the next 2 nights, I had the most amazing crystal dreams in my sleep, like deep dive astral travel dreams. I slept so well. And I was visiting these crystal temples all night in my dreams because this apophyllite took its job seriously. And it was like, okay, I want to be here. And so it helped me sleep really well. So to those of you who are sensitive and maybe feel like your crystals aren't helping you sleep, try giving them a job and asking them very specifically, help me sleep, help me have good dreams, and thank you for holding this sacred container. I mean, otherwise there's no way I would get away with like the giant, like seriously huge quartz I have in my room. No way. But it's got a job.
Yeah, that's really important. And as we set up our sacred space, to be doing it intentionally and to be creating it in a way that is going to serve our life and our work. I have a client who recently moved into a new space which had people on the other side of the wall. And, you know, for people like us, that can be challenging because their energies is over there and it's like, oh gosh, and especially when we're sleeping, like there's a lot of stuff. So we actually had her put little shelves and to grid the wall and to use like shungite and obsidian and some of these like protective dark stones, and to have that as the intention that we're putting you up there to shield me from any of the energies that are coming from the other side of the wall. And as soon as she did that, it was like, oh, I'm sleeping so much better. I'm not feeling anything from over there. It's just like I have this amazing grid that I can feel all the time. And so especially if you're living in a situation, maybe you live in an apartment or you live in a home with other people, to start to look at like, okay, well, how would I shield this wall if there's energies over there that I'm not interested in being a part of?
Yeah. The gridding and sacred geometry is an important component of that. And I've seen people do different examples of this where they'll paint a mural on the wall with, you know, a beautiful sacred geometry symbol like a Merkaba or a flower of life or something. They'll paint it on the wall, or they'll paint sacred symbols. This is one of my favorite things to do. If you're repainting, paint sacred symbols on the wall and then paint over it so they're always there in the paint.
Right. Or even to have like crushed crystals and put them in the paint.
Yeah.
And to start to look at, like, if you have your electrical meter or your refrigerator on the other side of the wall and you want to protect yourself from the frequencies, like starting to look at, oh, okay, I can actually use some of my sacred crystals and objects to start to protect me from stuff that maybe I don't want coming into my sleeping space.
Yeah. Also, in general, surrounding yourself with natural materials is going to have a different and much higher vibration than synthetic materials. Keep that in mind. You know, what kind of sheets are you sleeping on? Are you sleeping on like mine or organic cotton? Or, you know, you can do silk sheets or other natural fiber sheets. What is your furniture made out of? Is it plastic? Is it metal? Is it wood? That changes the vibration of the space that you're in. The paint that you use, are you using paint that's off-gassing, or are you using no VOC paint? These are all components to consider when creating your sacred space. Everything with intention. What colors are you painting? What textures are you surrounding yourself with? Hard materials that might energetically feel a little bit bouncy or uncomfortable? Are you surrounding yourself with softness? Do you have a nice balance? What's your lighting like? Everything, absolutely everything is a component of how we are crafting with very specific intention a nurturing, gentle environment for whatever space you're in.
And when we talk about lighting, you know, we have a lot of options for lighting. And I know that the compact fluorescent bulbs, there's lots of studies about how they're actually not good for you. The paint chips off the inside, and then you start getting these certain, frequencies of rays that really aren't very healthy for you.
Don't they have mercury in them as well?
They do have mercury in them, so they're really hard to dispose of. There's a lot of reasons not to use them now. So, for me, like, I use all incandescent bulbs. I'm like old school. It feels nicer to me. And then mostly I use lots of candles. Like, I am a super huge candle person. And, most of my lighting in the evening is through candles or really dim lights and salt lamps, because that creates that sacred space for me. And it calms my system, especially in the evening. And honestly, like a candle of light, like that one focus of light of, this flame, that creates a sacred space. Like, just lighting that candle and having that intention be that by this candle, I am creating sacred space. Is huge. And so even if you're going in to teach a class someplace and you're like, okay, this is a little bit crazy, I'll go in and bring candles and put them around and create that circle or that square inside of a space, so that it's, I'm starting to define what is there. So I think that candles are really important as sacred space creators. Yeah.
Altars in general also. So, and there are many different types of altars you can make. An altar can be as simple as, a single candle can be an altar, or one single stone placed with intention, or it can be, you go in like, any of the biggest, most beautiful, elaborate cathedrals, and they have these giant altars covered in beautiful, ornate gold filigree. So an altar can be anything in between, but please don't let a lack of experience or materials stop you from creating that. Again, single stone placed with intention.
Right, because the altar is a sacred space. Like, it is its own sacred container, and it is drawing frequency and energy into the larger space that it's in. And so we can create an altar that is sort of like our primary altar, and we can change it up or whatever. I'm often like, okay, how can we, I'm putting things in little rows, and little OCD about stuff sometimes. But
yeah, that's your jam, is creating beautiful altar space though. Like, you have the most magnificent altars because you put in the intention and the attention to put everything exactly in harmony with each other.
So, but one of the things that I recommend for my clients is that if you are working with a specific energy or frequency, either to incorporate into your primary altar or to build a separate altar in your space that is devoted to that energy. So if you are working with a particular archangel or a particular deity at all, whatever it is, an energy that you're drawing in, an animal that you're drawing into your field, and you're going to be working with that and asking it for it to help you in your healing work or in your life, to build a separate altar, a separate little space that's devoted to that being, using the colors that are associated with it, and different crystals and iconography and imagery and things that just when you see it, you're like, oh, that belongs with you. And it is that intentional focus that starts to draw that frequency toward you. And then it gives you a space for contemplation and reflection and connection to whatever those energies are that you're calling in.
Absolutely. You can write a prayer also, or, write some specific invocation intentions and have that on your altar as well. So there are many ways to create the sacred space. Let's chat briefly about casting a circle, where we're holding a container for the sacred work. I know I have kind of my way of doing it. You have your way of doing it. And of course, there are many, many, many other ways. Take us through your process, Kat.
Well, I especially when I work with You know, talking about like group work, when we do group work, you know, I'm always looking for like a round space or a square space.
Yeah.
You know, so like I'm like, oh gosh, we found a square room, yay. Or you know, using like a yurt, a round space, when the geometry is already contained, that just makes me super happy. It's like, oh, okay, part of the work has already been done for me.
Yeah.
So I'm always happy to find that. And then if maybe that's not possible, or within that space, starting to grid out the space, the room, in, you know, the container that I'm going to be holding. And so that it's very clear. There's a clear definition. This is outside the container and this is inside the container, and this is where we're working. And so then we can start to, you know, define and to call in the directions coming from each direction, calling in the energies that are coming from that place, calling in what's coming in from above, connecting to what is below, and connecting to self in the center, and starting to create this, you know, right, we're creating a portal for energy, for the work to happen. And in all mystical traditions, they talk about casting a circle and creating the space for the work to happen. Otherwise, there's just too much. There's everything is out there. And so when we create definition, now we have a place to actually do the work.
Mm-hmm.
To, you know, use sound, to use invocations, to call in specific energies, beings, and frequencies. And, you know, also it's very important to close it down at the end, and to shut down the container, that now the work is complete, and to thank all of the beings that have come in to assist, and the energies that have come in to assist, and to release them from the work that's been happening, and to close that down. I know that I've had in the past, I remember having a transformance and like not doing this. I do this thing where like I walk in the circle the opposite direction 3 times, and I didn't do the thing. And I remember getting up in the middle of the night and having to go outside, and I'm like walking in a circle and banging a drum and like being like doing all this weird stuff, because it wasn't fully closed. And I you know, got the message. It was like, okay, wait, there's still some stuff that's open, and there's still some portaling that's happening, and now it needs to be closed in a more complete way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think I don't really know exactly how to differentiate here in some of the components that I used in casting my space, because much of what I do is similar, but it comes through in a different way. So I'll use Reiki to establish my space, and which is one way of establishing an energetic container. I'll cleanse and clear the space and fill and seal the space with Reiki energies, calling in the guides and teachers to hold the sacred space, hold the container. And then based on moving forward from there, it really depends on what kind of work am I doing. Am I teaching a class? Am I doing a session? Am I working with an animal? Am I working with a human? Is it a distance session? Because those all have a role to play in me deciding how specifically, like what is the flavor of energy for holding the container. You know, if I'm doing a class for space. So I don't do it all beforehand. I mean, I'll do most of it, and, you know, I'll hold the clear container for them to then come and add their energy and make it even better. So that's a little bit different, as opposed to if I'm doing deep dive work with somebody into some really deep trauma stuff, I'm going to hold the container differently and call in maybe some different beings and set up in a different way. So that all depends as well. But yes, calling in the directions, using specific items, again, to create a grid, create sacred geometry, to create the sacred space, using sound to continue to clear the space. That's one thing I really like to do as I'm preparing to work, is I'll put on solfeggio tuners or chakra healing music and just let the sound clear the space while I'm doing other stuff. and then I'll come in and do the fine tuning work. But sound vibration does a really beautiful job of clearing space very quickly and very easily.
Right. And also when we're talking about clearing, smudging, using, sage or Palo Santo or sweetgrass or, whatever it is that you love to use, or using sprays if you can't set things on fire in your space, using, these sacred plants to be able to help us to clear the space is also really helpful. And that can be super fast and super easy. And so sometimes it's like this big elaborate thing, and it's all of the things and stuff. And sometimes it's just it's very simple. And it's using that intuitive hit around what it is that you're working on, what it is that you're, needing to call in, where you're at personally, where the person or people are that you're working with, and even, I'm just getting kind of this hit to talk about, like, creating this sacred space. Like if you are a parent and you have a child, and, children often, they're very sensitive to energies. They're very sensitive to beings that are coming in and all kinds of stuff. And often children have, issues with sleeping because they're so sensitive to energies. And so then starting to help to train yourself so you can help to train them on creating their own sacred space so that they can sleep well, and, utilizing sprays and and mists and stuff to clear the space and to give them this empowerment that that we have the right to declare that we are safe. Yeah. And we are held in our home, in our room, in our sacred space, and that we are not allowing anything that is negative to come into this space, and that we are only calling in light and love. And as we do that, we can start to, empower ourselves and to empower the next generation into, really holding a sacred space on a continual basis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was really important. I'm glad you brought that up. And creating the sacred space, for children, but also for others in our families or others in our offices or wherever who might not have that same awareness too. That's, having lived in a variety of different homes with different degrees of awareness, the place where I'm living now, I have housemates who are also sensitive and empathic. And so there's a great degree of awareness in how are we living together harmoniously and creating spaces that are beautiful and comfortable. And yet I would say also my degree of sensitivity is probably even more deep and acute than the rest of my housemates. And so then there's a level of consciousness that I'm holding for myself of, okay, yes, we are collectively holding a container together. And maybe you have some of these agreements with your families or other office mates of, okay, everybody's, getting along harmoniously, but then it's even more than that. It's a sacred space requires some really significant attention to what is the specific frequency that I am choosing to call into my immediate surroundings or into my body. So that's what I'd like to leave you with today is how can we be even more impeccable in how we are moving through the world, how we are living in the world, and creating sacred space within ourselves and then everywhere we go. One thing I like to offer as a suggestion to students and clients, especially my Reiki students, is I tell them before you get out of bed in the morning, put Reiki on the bottoms of your feet. So every step that you take is you are offering that sacred energy to the ground that you walk on, and you are spreading sacred space with you as you move out into the world, and every step you take is on sacred ground. Yeah.
Thanks, Michelle. I love that. That's beautiful.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yay.
Mm-hmm.
So anything, I think that was a beautiful place to wrap up our episode. Yeah. Anything else that you want to mention?
Yeah, I think so. I want to feel called to reach out to us. This is something that we both really enjoy and take a lot of personal and professional joy from, is creating sacred space. You know, Kat makes her beautiful altars, and I do a lot of work with helping people create sacred space, doing house clearings or whatever the deal is, or altar setup. It's a lot of fun for us personally, but also an essential component of creating a professional practice. So for those of you who are interested in receiving some support around what does it mean to create sacred space in your home, in your office, in your treatment room, please do reach out to us, and we are available to consult on that and support you in creating sacred space for yourselves.
And you can reach us at shamansistersessions@gmail.com or on our Facebook page, Shaman Sister Sessions, and send us a Facebook message. And we are available to, you know, chat about anything that's going on. You have anything coming up, Michelle, that you're working on and promoting right now? Or
yes, I have a few things. If you're located in Portland, I am teaching 2 events this weekend. All day Saturday is my sensory intuition class. It's a day-long immersion of cultivating your intuition. Oh gosh, it's so fun. It's basically playing all day and being psychic all day and helping people be more psychic. It's so fun. Sensory intuition all day Saturday, which is the 22nd, I believe. And then on Sunday, which I believe is the 23rd, the starting at 2, so 2 to 5 is self-care for empaths.
Ooh, so good.
Yeah, very good. It's part workshop, part group, channeled group healing. So you get to come learn some tools for the self-care, and then also receive healing from me and my mother, with whom I teach my classes, where we'll be doing a group healing exercise, and everybody gets some healing work from 2 masters. So that's this weekend. Also, our special guest from last week, Deshna Ubeda, I am speaking at the event that she is facilitating coming up May 4th through 6th, Embrace Festival, and she graciously offered a discount code to all of our viewers. So if you go on embracefestival.com to buy your ticket, the discount code is Inner Divine to receive 20% off or 25% off. Yeah.
So good, Michelle.
Thanks. How about you? Anything coming up? Healer's Process.
Healer's Process, I'm about to launch. I've been working on my sales page and just getting all the details in order. So the Healer's Process is going to start in May, sometime in May, toward the end of May, and run through June. And I don't know when it is. It's June, July. We're going to do a retreat here in July. And this is my core foundational course, and I'm building it out and offering more coaching throughout, and it's going to be and making it more weeks, and it's going to be incredible. So be on the lookout for that, and if you're super interested, just shoot me a message, and I'll put you on the list to receive more information about it.
And that one, do you have to be, because I took your first round of Healer's Process not in the same location. Is it different now, or can it still be online?
Yeah, it's all going to be online, except for we're going to do a live retreat here.
Cool. Okay. And having experienced Healer's practices, and I highly recommend it. Yeah. So thank you. Right. That's it. We're done. Thank you, viewers. Thank you for joining us. And again, please feel free to reach out. We love to hear from you. Send us any thoughts on what would you like to hear us talk about next.
Absolutely.
Yep. We do have, I believe next week let me make sure it's in my calendar. Yes, next week we have a special guest, my dear friend Jennifer Elise, who is a visionary photographer, visionary entrepreneur, leader, woman of many, many talents, who is hosting and facilitating an event that I am speaking at as well in May called Empowered. It's a day-long immersive retreat for women's empowerment and being fully expressed as our highest selves for who we are as women, empowered, empathy, power, education. So please join us next week with special guest Jennifer Elise.
Yay. Thanks, Michelle.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I'll see you soon.
Okay, bye.